You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with Travis Reier on Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. This is Southern Fried Sports with Bama Online senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Make it through this year, I think I'm gonna put this bottle down. I guess as time goes on, I'll grow to miss it less than I will now. And I think I'm gonna tell her that I'm gonna go away for a while, till I can get this demon out.
It is 11 a.m. on a Monday morning. It is time once again for Southern Fried Sports on your home for University of Alabama Athletics. Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier, right there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Great options for you, whether it is your March Madness treats. You probably need a refill after that crazy weekend. You've got your Easter baskets to consider. And look, even if you do your own Easter basket, maybe you like to do that, that's your tradition in your family, you can take it up to Peterbrook Chocolatier and they'll help you get it packed and ready to go. They'll take care of that for you at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North. Joined on the program by the executive producer of Southern Fried Sports, Jacob Harrison, who together we combine to form the 60-minute boo of Sports Talk Radio. And this, the eve, also, by the way, we're going to talk a lot of hoops. But for Jacob Harrison, this is almost like Christmas Eve, man. You've got Pro Day at the University of Alabama tomorrow. So many questions. I don't know if Jacob Harrison will be able to sleep tonight. His hair may be on fire. I can't see it right now in anticipation of Pro Day. But, Jacob, what will Najee Harris run? What will Devontae Smith weigh? How will Jalen Waddle look coming off the injury? How far has Dylan Moses improved with that knee? Man, so many great questions for Pro Day 2021 at Alabama.
Yeah, I was so excited. I thought that the Pro Day was today when I got to work today and was anticipating covering the Pro Day after it was done. But, I mean, those are all valid questions. I'm also interested in Alex Leatherwood. We haven't seen him since the last day of Senior Bowl practice, like, at all. And it's also going to be interesting to see how Deonte Brown weighs in. And also who visits with Landon Dickerson. And of course, I'm going to be very mindful as to who the Pittsburgh Steelers send to Tuscaloosa tomorrow.
No doubt about it. Maybe Carl Dunbar makes a return trip, right, to come down. I guess defensive line, though, when you talk about the Steelers, not as much of a concern, but you never know. I bet Carl will show up. You know, he's familiar with that, with those stomping grounds as the former defensive line coach at Alabama. And you got Christian Barmore that a lot of scouts are going to want to see as well. So we'll get into some Pro Day talk as we move throughout the program, obviously into tomorrow as well. But we are centered up on March Madness, no doubt about that. You've got the Alabama women's team tipping off essentially right now in San Antonio, Texas, as a 7 seed taking on the Tar Heels of North Carolina. Last appearance for Alabama women's basketball in an NCAA tournament against North Carolina way back in 1999, a century ago, essentially. It feels like it for sure, but Alabama looking to get a W out in the Lone Star State. I like Alabama in this game. I like the versatility, as we've talked about before, with the guard play led by Jordan Lewis, Jasmine Walker's versatility both on the perimeter and the paint, and then Araya Copeland, who at times can be a dominant force in the post. Yeah, I think Alabama's physicality. Jordan Lewis at point, not maybe the quickest. She's got quickness, but maybe not. She's not Javon Quinterly, okay, off the bounce. But she's a physical point guard who can get downhill, get to the bucket. Again, Copeland with that presence in the paint. I think the combination of those things, I think Alabama women get it done. Get it done against the Tar Heels. We'll talk about the men's matchup tonight against the Maryland Terrapins. Ironically enough, if Alabama's women's team beats North Carolina today, they too will likely see Maryland in a second-round matchup. But we do know the Alabama fellas are going to see the Terps tonight up in Indianapolis. It's at the Indiana Bankers Fieldhouse, home to the Indiana Pacers. So you go from Venerable Hinkle Fieldhouse to the NBA home of the Pacers. Maybe Alabama will shoot it a little bit better. Maybe that's exactly what John Petty needs. Although you look at Hinkle and you think it's kind of bandboxish. It's a little different in terms of its configuration, kind of like Coleman, it looks like anyway, in some ways, how it's set up. But maybe you can get John Petty going from beyond three, beyond the arc, give him credit, continues to work hard in every other facet of the game, whether it's rebounding, whether it's playing defense. Just need John Petty to see a few go through the net early. The earlier, the better tonight against this Maryland team, which was very impressive. Maryland, very, very impressive in his first-round win over UConn with Eric Ayala. That's the matchup tonight. I mean, we can get all into nuts and bolts and things like that, but how Alabama goes about dealing with Eric Ayala and limiting his effectiveness as a two-way player, a guy who at 6'4", 6'5", can sort of bully opposing guards on the defensive end, because it's not so much about speed and quickness with him, but he is of size. And when he wants to get to the rim, he didn't have much of a problem with that against UConn. And then on top of that, he knocks down some threes in the win over the Huskies. You can't let him get it going both ways. And he also facilitates the rest of that Maryland offense in doing so. If he's getting into the paint and he's giving you problems and he's scoring at the rim and you have to collapse and commit an extra guy to him from the wing, well, then you leave guys like Aaron Wiggins for Maryland open from three, and they can certainly make you pay. By the way, the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line on what is also a Winners and Losers Monday here on the program. If you'd like to jump on board at 205-342-9904, you are more than welcome to do so. I mean, it's another Monday, Jacob, with a ton of winners where the Alabama athletics department is concerned. You had Alabama gymnastics winning an SEC title. It's 10th in program history up in Huntsville over the weekend. Also an individual title as a part of that. So Dana Duckworth's squad gets it done in SEC gymnastics. Alabama softball takes 2 of 3 from Tennessee over the weekend at the Rhodes House. Dropped that first one. Came back and won 2 straight to win that series. Alabama softball now 5-1 in SEC play. Trailing, Arkansas's improved in softball in recent years. Like the rest of the league, Arkansas committed to softball, built a new facility, did all those things to make itself relevant, not only from a conference perspective, but also on the national scene. And now you're seeing Arkansas softball at 6-0 in the league. But as you might expect, right behind the Razorbacks, you've got Alabama and Florida at 5-1 in the league through 2 weekends. So on the Diamonds, for softball anyway, it was a good weekend. It wasn't a terrible weekend for Alabama baseball out at number 1 Arkansas. You know, you didn't get what you wanted. If you're Brad Bohannon, you wanted to win the series, obviously. You wanted to take 2 of 3 on the road. That would have been huge for this team. But you did get what you need. You needed to win 1. You didn't need to get swept out there on the opening weekend of SEC baseball play. So Alabama gets the win in the Friday night game. I think Alabama used it all up offensively. On Friday night. I tweeted as much. While Alabama was pounding the Razorbacks to the tune of a 16-1 win in game 1 of that series, I was like, guys, save a little for Saturday and Sunday. Don't use them all up in a 16-1 game. Well, kind of turned out that way. Alabama scoring just 2 runs in losses to Arkansas on Saturday and Sunday. So a lot to get into. Spring football underway at the Capstone. We mentioned Pro Day set for tomorrow at Alabama. Alabama football back on the practice field. Coming up later this afternoon, you've got Alabama hoops. You're bookending with Alabama hoops. Early with the women, late with the men. That's a late night tip. That's one of those 7:45. And that's if everything goes according to plan in the first couple of games at Indiana Banker Fieldhouse. You're going to have that surprising matchup before Alabama there at the Fieldhouse with UCLA and Abilene Christian. How about Abilene Christian? Little old Abilene Christian taking it to the big state U, taking it to Texas in that round one game. That was a little bit of a shocker. Yours truly on record, of course, telling you Texas probably the biggest obstacle between Alabama and the Final Four. Well, you hope that's the case. You hope that's the case for the rest of this East Regional, because if it is, Alabama should be in good shape. Some really monster matchups at the top of the bracket in the East today as well, with Michigan LSU 1 versus an 8. And I can promise you, Juwan Howard right now, after he spent some time watching LSU, especially here of late, he doesn't feel like he's getting an 8 in round 2. He feels like he's getting a Sweet 16 type matchup in the 32. LSU right now more like a 4 seed than an 8. So that ought to be a heck of a matchup coming up later this evening. A lot of stuff going on in that evening window of your NCAA tournament coverage. And then kind of an under-the-radar game that you're also going to have at the top of the bracket between Colorado, Pac-12 member Colorado. Pac-12's been lights out, man, so far in the tournament. We were told going into this tournament, watch out, the Big Ten, exceptionally stout, very strong. And then we see a 1 seed in Illinois go home, courtesy of Loyola of Chicago and Sister Jean, bless her, 101 years old, just chilling at the tournament in Indianapolis, watching her Ramblers take out, again, another flagship school. You had Abilene Christian do it to Texas, and you had Loyola of Chicago do it to the University of Illinois. So you've had Ohio State go out as a 2 seed. We were told the Big Ten was going to dominate this thing. Not so much. In fact, right now, the Big Ten leaning more on stepchildren than those of the DNA that has been in that league for a long, long time, because Maryland taking on Alabama tonight. And then, of course, you have Rutgers that won a first-round game. So we'll see how things go this evening. We're going to step aside for our first break. We come back. We'll get into more spring football talk. Nick Saban addressed the media following last Friday's practice. We'll talk some Alabama football with you. We'll get into more winners and losers. The NCAA already a big loser in getting both these men's and women's tournaments started. We'll do all that and more when Southern Fried Sports returns on a Monday, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.
From the University of Alabama, this is Crimson Tide Today. It's a daily update on Bama sports, and it's brought to you by C Spire. Add C Spire Fiber to your roster at cspire.com/AL Fiber. Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Alabama men's basketball used an 18-4 second-half run to hold off a pesky Iona squad 68-55 in the opening round of the 2021 NCAA tournament. With the victory, the Crimson Tide advances to the second round, where it will meet the 10th-seeded Maryland Terrapins, which defeated UConn on Saturday. Alabama and Maryland will tip off at 7:45 p.m. Central on Monday night, with coverage on the radio starting at 6:30 p.m. Senior forward Herbert Jones led all scorers for the Crimson Tide with 20 points, his third 20-point game of the season, and 6 rebounds, while SEC Tournament Most Valuable Player Javon Quinterly ended with 11 points off the bench. Guards John Petty Jr. and Jaden Shackelford each contributed 10 points in the win. I'll have more in a moment.
Bad internet is bad for business. We've all been there. Lagging video chats, slow downloads. Oh, come on. It's just not a good look. Instead, call C Spire Business. Our local experts deliver gigabit speeds backed by thousands of miles of fiber for the fastest, most reliable internet around. Period. No excuses, no apologies. Just fiber-fast internet that works. C-Spire Business. See how our fiber solutions can help power your success at cspirebusiness.com.
We've got you covered for Alabama women's basketball in the NCAA tournament. Alabama is the number 7 seed in the Hemisphere region and will face the number 10 seed, North Carolina Tar Heels, on Monday morning at 11 a.m. Our radio coverage from San Antonio begins at 10:55 a.m. as Alabama makes its first NCAA tournament appearance since 1999. And that's your Bama update. Crimson Tide Today brought to you by C-Spire. Crimson Tide Today is a production of the Crimson Tide Sports.
Sky partially sunny this afternoon, the high 73, becoming cloudy tonight, the low 56. Tomorrow, cloudy with a chance of showers and thunderstorms by afternoon, the high 74. Wednesday, occasional showers and thunderstorms likely, the high 73. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 65 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Tide 100.9. For more coverage of Alabama football, visit us at Tide100.9.com or download the free Tide 100.9 app.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
My name is Jonas. I'm carrying the wheel. Thanks for all you've shown us. This is how we feel. Come sit next to me, pour yourself some tea, just like Grandma made when couldn't find sleep. Things were better then, once but never again. We've all left the den and typewriting. Choo-choo train left right on time. A ticket costs only your mind. Driver said, hey man, we go all the way. Of course we were willing to pay.
They're coming out of the first media timeout over there in San Antonio at the women's NCAA tournament, and Alabama with an 8-5 lead over North Carolina. So a solid start. Neither team exactly lighting it up offensively, but look, you know where they're playing this game, right? In the Alamo Dome. So yeah, shooting a basketball in a football stadium is always a lot of fun. Always a real challenge. But Alabama getting the better of it so far in that matchup with North Carolina. In fact, Hannah Barber, the veteran guard from Homewood High School, just knocked down a three off an assist from Megan Abrams. So it's 11-5 Alabama with 4:32 left in the first quarter. They do it the right way in the women's game. The men need to go ahead and make this change. They've needed to make this change for years. The quarters in the women's games, 4 10-minute quarters. Of course, the men play the 20-minute halves, and then with 11 minutes in the half, you're in the bonus already. So you get half of a half spent shooting free throws. Not in the women's game. The fouls reset with each quarter. 5-team fouls, and you shoot 2. You just shoot 2 in the women's game. There's no 1-and-1. I like that as well. 205-342-9904 is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. If you'd like to jump on board with us on a Monday morning, we'd love to hear from you. Alabama spring football, as we know, well underway now. Crimson Tide set to return to the practice field this afternoon following last Friday's opening practice, a first spring practice of any kind for Alabama since 2019. Shorts and helmets. Got to go through a little bit of an acclimation period when you jump back out there. And we were all crowded around our phones, crowded around our laptops. We are now ultra dependent on those little vignettes of practice video we get from UA. No media viewing periods for the time being. You know, and those weren't exactly expansive time frames that we were working with, but you could get out there for 10 minutes or so and at least get an idea of who's out there first and foremost. It's always roll call every day, but really the first day of spring, first day of fall camp, you're just trying to find out who's practicing. Then it's more of just getting a look at guys, seeing how maybe they've come through the fourth quarter program, A lot of guys going in their second year make drastic physical changes, so you kind of check that out. See if there's any position experimentation that might be going on as far as a wide receiver going over to DB or vice versa. You know, when Blake Sims was at Alabama, we had to do that almost practice by practice. For about 3 years there, you weren't exactly sure where Blake Sims was going to be when you walked through the doors there and out into the practice area at the Hank Crisp. Well, that's the indoor facility, but the outdoor facility right there next door. You just had to see where Blake was at. But you did hear from Nick Saban post-practice. Thought it was interesting in terms of availability, guys who are coming off postseason surgeries that you're not going to see a lot or hear a lot about during spring practice, with an emphasis on the offensive side of the ball, which becomes even more interesting because you know what Alabama has to replace over there. Not so much with Emil Ekiyor out, because there's a sense of security there with him as an every-game starter at guard last year. You know what you're getting with him if he's going to stick there at right guard. He can play left guard. He can play center. But then also Pierce Quick continuing to miss time. That's an extension from last season, had some issues during the season. So the interior of the offensive line should be interesting throughout spring drills. Doug Marone's got some quality options, even with a couple of those guys limited and or out. Chris Owens back as a 6-year senior. Again, that's a nice sense of security you have there in the interior of the offensive line. And really, Chris can give you something at just about any spot, because you also are considering that right tackle position with the departure of Alex Leatherwood on the left side, Evan Neal presumably going over to the left side, and viable candidates at right tackle. You got so many of these tackles for Alabama that cross-train between guard and tackle. So Tommy Brown, the guy who initially, I think 6'7", worked at tackle early on in his career, has been more so inside the last year or so, has a real chance now in 15 practices to make a case at one of those guard spots. Kendall Randolph is another veteran that you're very comfortable with, whether it's been tackle, whether it's been guard, whether it's been tight end a good bit these last 2 seasons. And you can go back to the end of the 2020 season and look at tight ends like Miller Forrestall and Jaleel Billingsley, and then you've got Randolph, who started 4 of the last 5 games at tight end. So he was as much in that mix as either Billingsley or Forrestall, but because of your current situation at guard, Kendall Randolph becomes a real possibility. Now, Kendall physically, probably more along the lines of what you would see at right tackle or even tight end. But I'll say this for Kendall Randolph. When he has been in games at guard with an emphasis on a couple of years ago, when Keelan Robinson was a true freshman, when that second group came in and they ran behind Kendall Randolph, it seemingly went for explosive plays a lot with him in there. So he obviously can give you something there at the guard position. But you got these young tackles, these early enrollees, J.C. Latham, Tommy Brockermeyer. What can they do at the tackle position? Jadeon Cohen in his second year, Damian George. These are a couple of guys, again, when you think about cross-training, they are viable candidates. They could play inside. One of these young tackles could play inside. Look at how many of these Alabama tackles in recent history have done that. Evan Neal did it a couple of years ago before going back out to tackle last year. Alex Leatherwood did it before finishing his final 2 seasons as the starter at left tackle. Nick Saban has said it many, many times, and it ain't going to change anytime soon. It's all about finding the best 5, and that could be any number of combinations. Now, Evan Neal at tackle, Emil Ekiyor at guard, probably Chris Owens at center. You would seem to think that's 2 or 3 that you got right there. But when it comes to guard and tackle, those other spots, and maybe even center, we'll see. Could be any number of combinations by the time we get to A-Day on April the 17th. 205-342-9904. Also, with John Mechie limited and or out, wide receiver right now is as fascinating as it's been in a long, long time, because there's always been pretty much that one guy, and I think John Mechie is certainly going to be one of those 2 or 3 guys. Is John Mechie a high-level number 1 receiver? I think he can be. I think his production last year, when you look around the rest of the SEC, obviously he's massively overshadowed by Devontae Smith. But when you just look at his numbers, he nearly had a 1,000-yard season last year, John Mechie, against all Power 5 competition, almost exclusively SEC competition. And when it wasn't SEC competition, it was Notre Dame and Ohio State in the college football playoff. And he did it, as we're learning more and more now, at least through a portion of that season, at less than 100%. So he certainly has that capability to graduate to that 1,000-yard club that we've seen from Judy, that we've seen from Devontae Smith. But without his presence out there on a daily basis, you got to go back a ways to find a rotation that is going to be trying to figure as much out at the top as Alabama is going through right now. You know, it's the perfect opportunity for a veteran like Xavier Williams or one of these second-year players or 2 or 3 of these second-year players. We've heard a lot of good things about Javon Baker. Okay, let's see it. It's time for it to start showing up. Trayshawn Holden, this would be a good time to make a move. Taiu Jones-Bell, I know it's just second year, but you've got 3 early enrollees in here now, 2 of them 5-stars, another a very dynamic player in Christian Leary. You got JoJo Earle coming in the summer. They put the pressure on these guys quickly. It's not like you can come into Alabama and go, well, you know, especially at the skill spots. Now, maybe at offensive line, which is a developmental position, it's more the case. But if you come in at a skill spot, even quarterback at Alabama, you better hit the ground running because that window can come and go pretty quickly. No doubt about it. We're going to head to our next break here on the program. When we come back, did you see where Prime took an L down in Montgomery over the weekend? Coach Prime. And he didn't like it. They trolled Coach Prime down there at Bama State. We'll talk about that and more when Southern Fried Sports returns on a Monday, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.
You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with BamaOnline.com senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with BamaOnline.com senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
If you want to destroy my sweater, hold this thread as I walk away.
Hey, what's up? Did you hear about the party? I think I'm gonna go, but my friends don't really want to go. Can I get a ride?
Oh no, it gone, bye-bye. And I die if you want to.
The Southern Fried Sports playlist for a Monday program. The Blue Album by Weezer. Going back to 1994 for that baby. The last perfect rock and roll album produced by any band. In my opinion, anyway. That one right there. The Blue Album. The 2 oldest kids were basically early childhood raised on the Blue Album up through Maladroit from Weezer. Poor things. Riding around in those family trucksters. Everyone on the outside thinking, you know, there's a together family. They're in an expedition with the dual in-seat televisions for the little ones to watch their shows. Meanwhile, the CD player. That's right, CD player back in 94, pal. Mid-90s anyway. Late 90s. Just blaring Weezer. Especially in the early aughts, about the time Maladroit dropped. Yeah. There you go. That's your Southern Fried Sports playlist of the day. Out in San Antonio, good news so far for the Alabama women's basketball team. 22-15 leaders early in the second quarter over North Carolina. Alabama getting some balanced scoring. And when it gets a fourth scorer, when Alabama gets something from someone other than Copeland, Walker, and Lewis, that's when the Crimson Tide becomes a real problem. And that was the case in the first quarter. Hannah Barber with a couple of threes. So she added to that mix. And Megan Abrams is capable of doing it offensively. And she did it as well with 5 of her own. Jordan Lewis with 6. And also Jasmine Walker with 5. So you like the balanced scoring. Araya Copeland didn't score in the first quarter, but she did give you 3 rebounds and 2 blocks. And most importantly for an Alabama team, again, not especially deep. No foul trouble as of yet with 8:45 left in the second quarter out in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome. Now Alabama 22, North Carolina 17. 205-342-9904 is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. Winners and losers on a Monday. Coach Prime took the L. Coach Prime took the L down in Montgomery over the weekend. Alabama State knocks off Jackson State. And Prime got trolled. I don't know if you saw this, Jacob Harrison. Did you see the video board at Bama State? That's a nice stadium, by the way, if you've been through that sort of cut through. If you're going from 65 over to 231, which I do quite a bit, getting down to see Pops and the fam in Northeast Florida, you go right by the Alabama State campus, and they built that new stadium not a decade ago, and it's big time. But apparently the video board at Alabama State after the Hornets win over the Tigers flashed a throwback pic of Jerry Curled Prime back in his heyday, his playing days. I don't know whether it was the Braves, the Falcons, the Cowboys, but it was a throwback pic of Prime that they trolled him with immediately after the game. And Prime wasn't happy about it. Prime in his post-game press conference let ASU know about it. He also said that ASU refused to sell tickets to the JSU fan base and that Alabama State did not allow Jackson State into the visiting locker room until just a few hours before the game's kickoff. A few hours. I mean, how much time do you need in the locker room? I guess 3 would be pretty much standard. So they cut some of that for Prime. He just didn't appreciate it. But you know what? Here's the thing about it. It's all still a W for Prime because you got TMZ. You got TMZ talking about Jackson State football. You think TMZ was talking about Jackson State football before Prime? No, I don't think so. So it's still a W in the long run, I guess, for Deion Sanders. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line as we get you ready for Pro Day 2021 at the University of Alabama. Jacob Harrison, we've talked about this in the last week or so as far as the biggest questions going into those workouts tomorrow. We hit on some of them at the outset of the show. In terms of outside interest, though, Jacob, do you think it is Najee in his performance, or do you think it's Devontae, weighing in? How do you see those in terms of priority? I guess first for fans and draftniks like yourself, but then maybe from the team's perspective, because that, as we know, that those things don't always match up.
Well, Smith already says that he's weighing 170 and that he's not going to do anything tomorrow. So that kind of narrows down what his whole entire situation is. Whether he weighs 2 pounds heavier than 170 isn't going to change anything. I still contend that Najee's 40 is probably going to be the most exciting thing of the day, unless he runs, like a 4.58, which is kind of what I expect him to. Anything lower or higher is what's going to be the exception of whether or not he's a mid-round first or an early second. But I'm still keeping a closer eye on the offensive linemen because they're the ones that have more leeway in where they could go, if they can climb into the first or if they'll fall into the third, especially when it comes with Leatherwood and Deontay Brown, as well as what Christian Barmore is going to do. I think his situation is more just go out there and look disciplined in everything that you do, and if he needs any correcting or anything like that, just take it in stride and show that you're coachable.
I think that's a great point about Christian Barmore, because I think his rep is that he hasn't always taken care of the perceived little things. He has plenty of big play production on his tape and on his bio, but he has also had instances where maybe he's gone hero ball a little bit, and ultimately it's cost the defense as a whole. So it's a great point about technique, technical, and attention to detail just in general. Just everything you do tomorrow, as soon as you step inside the Hank Crisp Indoor facility, make sure it's on point. Everything. And so, yeah, with Barmore, I think that's a big thing for him. What can't Deontay Brown weigh tomorrow, Jacob? I mean, obviously the Senior Bowl was not a good look for him or a good number for him. What can't he weigh tomorrow?
Well, they're doing some media stuff today, so I've been keeping up with that for the past 10 or 15 minutes. Supposedly he's weighed in at 346, and I think that's a pretty great number. That was kind of the number that you were saying before we started the show. I think you said 342. All of that is really, really good for him, and he said that he's been working on his lateral movement and things like that. The things that were his weaknesses are what he's putting his efforts into, and I think that for him to make such a drastic change in 2 months, that's really, really big for him, and could help him kind of climb into that second round.
Yeah, he needed that after the Senior Bowl, no doubt about it. I was putting his over-under for weight at like 340.5, and that's still a little over, but under 350's fine for Deontay. You just can't be 365 or mid 360s at your pro day after that Senior Bowl performance. Some other guys, it's a big day for. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? A year ago, so much of the talk and the celebration, really, that Dylan Moses was coming back for another year. Physically at times, many times throughout the 2020 season, I thought it was pretty clear. Still not quite there yet. And I think a team potentially can get a lot of value out of Dylan. I think if you're a team and you're able to get him second, maybe third round even, maybe mid rounds, he basically saved you a year last year by going back to school. So if you get him as a third rounder, I got to think physically he's in a better place right now than he was against Ohio State back in January. I got to believe that. He's further removed from the injury. He's coming up on the 2-year anniversary coming up in August. And, whereas they've come a long way as far as rehab and surgeries and procedures are concerned, it still seems like with that kind of injury at that position, it's a year. It's at least a year to get back to some semblance of pre-injury. It was that way all the way back to Dont'a Hightower in 2010. Dont'a coming off that knee injury in 2008, and Dante's was extensive now. Dante's wasn't just a simple ACL tear with maybe a little bit of a meniscus or an MCL. Dante's, from what I understand, was a triad. So 2010, it was hard at times to watch Dont'a Hightower out there. But 2011, he was great. He was great. And I think Dylan Moses has that kind of potential, and that's gonna present some potentially really nice value for an NFL team. 205-342-9904. Going to step aside for a final break. When we come back, more of a Monday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.
The sky partially sunny this afternoon, the high 73, becoming cloudy tonight, the low 56. Tomorrow, cloudy with a chance of showers and thunderstorms by afternoon, the high 74. Wednesday, occasional showers and thunderstorms likely, the high 73. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 66 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide football.
Alabama touchdown.
Only on Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
I've got Dungeon Master's Guide. I've got 12-sided die. I've got Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler too, waiting there for me. Yes, I do. I've got posters on my wall. My favorite rock group, Kiss. I've got Ace Frehley. I've got Peter Criss.
They got a fun one shaping up right now up in Indianapolis in the West region. Oregon and Iowa getting after it to open second round play on this Monday. And with a little more than 4 minutes to go at last check, Iowa 41, Oregon 38. Pretty entertaining game to this point. Meanwhile, out in San Antonio, Texas, Alabama approaching halftime. The women are in their matchup with the North Carolina Tar Heels. 1:17 left in the second quarter. Alabama 36, North Carolina 31. Jordan Lewis for Alabama. 15 points in the first half. She's getting the shots up, 6 of 14. The dome doesn't seem to be affecting Alabama from three all that much. Crimson Tide, 5 of 10 from beyond the arc so far. 5 of 6 from the free throw line. So Alabama with a 5-point lead over North Carolina as they approach halftime out there in San Antone. And it is a winners and losers Monday here on Southern Fried Sports. And, of course, the NCAA can't get out of its own way. As you heard and saw, I'm sure, late last week. The NCAA, it's almost as if they thought, you know what? These are men's and women's teams. And so it's not like men's and women's basketball players interact or converse or, say, social media friends. So let's load up the guys with all the swag, all of the workout equipment, all of the best in Indianapolis. And then for the ladies down in San Antonio, we'll give them not even half of the same type of swag. And how about for a workout facility, we'll give them this pathetic looking rack of dumbbells, and that'll be it. I mean, did you really think? I mean, first and foremost, why wasn't it just rubber stamp? You've got the blueprint for what you're going to do in Indianapolis. You can't just replicate that to San Antonio. I mean, it's like you had to go out of your way to make it half butt for the ladies. Not even half butt. I guess I don't know if I can say what I really want to say about that. But, wow, the NCAA, of course, it blows up on social media. And then the ever-reactive NCAA, once things go down the crapper, oh, we're going to take care of this. We're going to get this fixed. Like I said, it was almost like you had to try to screw that up, and they still managed to do it. So, yeah, the NCAA has been saved in some ways in that the games on the men's side, you've had the Cinderellas. And, again, here on the program, we're anti-Cindy's, okay? We're not Cindy-friendly on Southern Fried Sports. We don't like all the Cinderellas. Now, we don't mind Syracuse being sort of like a double-digit seed and moving on, or UCLA, but I don't like too many Oral Roberts, all right? I'll take one. You can have one Cinderella. That's fine. But when we start getting in these second-round matchups and we got, like, UCLA and Abilene Christian, I'm not for that. Alabama, it works out pretty well, or it could. You get past a 10 seed tonight in Maryland, you get another double-digit seed in the 8. As we talked about earlier in the show, meanwhile, at the top of that bracket, it's an absolute Sweet 16 already type of environment with Michigan and LSU and also Colorado and Florida State going to chalk in their first-round games. So, but the NCAA, wow, unbelievable. 205-342-9904 is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. A few moments left in today's program. Again, so much on the plate this time of year. We love it. We love it here because we love a little bit of everything. Obviously, spring football, we're glad to see back. And all the storylines that you have with this Alabama team and really around the Southeastern Conference in general. Quarterback position at a number of places up for grabs. I was looking at working on a wide receiver piece for BamaOnline.com where opposing wide receivers on Alabama's 2021 schedule is concerned. And it seems like more than a couple of these candidates that I have for this top 5 list for opposing wide receivers are contingent on the quarterback situation. Now, might be a little bit of a surprise to you, but I'm going to have John Rice Plumlee among my top 5 opposing wide receivers on Alabama's schedule. He's tracking down fly balls currently for the Ole Miss baseball team, but I think when the fall rolls around, he'll be taking fungos from Matt Corral's right arm. And look, I get it. Even when you look at Ole Miss's returning wide receivers without Elijah Moore, who is headed to the NFL, Dontario Drummond had a nice season. Jonathan Mingo has a lot of ability on the outside. But I just get the sense Lane's got something up his sleeve for John Rice Plumlee. Now, Plumlee, he may end up being like Ainias Smith, a Texas A&M. That's where I run into a little bit of conflict. I did this with Ainias Smith with the running backs. I had him as a top 5 running back on Alabama's schedule. In reality, potentially anyway, he might be just more of a slot guy or a wide receiver because you've got, you've got Spiller, Isaiah Spiller there at the running back position. And I think Plumlee could be sort of that guy too. You can line him up anywhere. I think he'll be more of a receiver though, because you not only have Jerrion Ely back at running back for Ole Miss, but Snoop Connor is a really solid back too. You know, Texas A&M had more of a need at running back in 2020. That's why you saw Ainias Smith there as much as you did. And I don't know if they're going to have that much of a need in 2021, so it may be that Smith is more of a wide receiver, even more so than he was last year. I think Plumlee's in that sort of boat as well. And then again, you've got these other candidates among these wide receivers and their quarterback contingent. Treylon Burks at Arkansas is an absolute monster. He's 6'3", 225 pounds. Had a 200-yard game at Missouri. Didn't do as much against Alabama. Just 2 catches for 16 yards. But he is a load. Now, you've got a quarterback transition there. I think Arkansas feels good about Jefferson coming in there with Felipe Franks moving on. But it's a transition nonetheless. You consider a guy like Jacob Copeland at Florida. Alabama will see him on September the 18th. He averaged 19 yards per catch last year, 3 touchdowns. It was overshadowed because you had Kadarius Toney, Trayvon Grimes at wide receiver, Kyle Pitts, at the tight end position, but really as much of a wide receiver as a tight end. Well, Jacob Copeland's got to step up. All those guys have moved on, and he has number 1 receiver attributes physically. Again, though, bigger question. Will he have a quarterback capable of getting him the ball on a consistent basis? Jaden Walley really came on at Mississippi State over the second half of last season. About the time Alabama shut out Mississippi State, Mike Leach made the commitment to Will Rogers at quarterback, and it seemingly coincided with Wally flourishing at wide receiver. Leach has had a couple. He had a couple of 100 catch guys at Washington State. And I don't know if Wally's going to be a 100 catch guy because the running back position in that offense with Leach, Marks, the running back for Mississippi State, had 60 catches last year. Running backs get a lot of catches in that offense. But I think Wally can be 70 plus, especially if that dynamic between him and Will Rogers continues to develop. But I think Kayshon Boutte, of all these guys of LSU, has a chance to be the guy at the top of the list where opposing wide receivers are concerned. I mean, he just went off. Once Terrace Marshall Jr. joined the opt-out club with Jamar Chase, Boutte was tremendous down the stretch of last season, and he did it with a fellow freshman at quarterback in Max Johnson. And it's not all that difficult to envision Boutte and Johnson teaming up for another couple of years to be one of college football's top quarterback receiver combinations. So Kayshon Boutte had a 100-yard game against Alabama. And then he had a SEC single game record, 308 against Ole Miss. So there you go. Some college football talk to get you out of here on a Monday. Out in San Antonio at halftime, the Alabama women's basketball team leads North Carolina 41-31. Let's see if the ladies can get it done in the second half of their first round game. Thanks to Jacob for producing the program. Thanks to you for listening as well. The lunch whistle on this Monday, Southern Ale House. They're going to have all the March Madness action on those televisions in the bar area there at Southern Ale House. So get by there right now. Catch the second half of the women's game. Have a great lunch. Happy hour coming up later. You'll have the Alabama men's game later this evening, I'm sure, at Southern Ale House. Southern Ale House, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North. Until 11 a.m. on Tuesday, have a great rest of your Monday, everybody.
Thank you